Welcome to the Soul Science Nutrition Podcast, where you'll discover that when it comes to your health, you're so much more powerful than you've been led to believe. And now, your host. She's a holistic nutrition and lifestyle coach, chef, author, and yogi, Christine O'Casey.
Hello, and welcome to the Soul Science Nutrition Podcast. I'm Christine O'Casey. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Today's special guest goes back to my time as a culinary student back in 2010 at the Natural Gourmet Institute for Health and Culinary Arts. You see, it was during my studies to become a natural food chef that my relationship with food took on a whole new dimension. I experienced this deep connection with the concept of food as medicine that went way beyond the limited diet mentality, the way beyond the just standard nutritional mentality of good foods, bad foods, fattening foods. I discovered that the food itself had profound healing powers, but really so did the enjoyment of eating the food, preparing the food, getting your hands in the food. My time at the Natural Gourmet Institute showed me how valuable and life-changing it really is when we recover this natural-born connection to the food that we put in our bodies. For me, I learned what a gift cooking was because it became this channel for creativity, artistry, passion, and pleasure. The gifts were truly life-changing. Number one, a deep reverence for Mother Earth and how our food is truly our most basic connection to her. Number two, a genuine awe, really, for the design and the inner workings of our bodies. And number three, food was in so many ways the highest form of self-care and a fundamental tool to heal our bodies and change our lives. So yes, because the bounty of food itself, but also because of the awakened consciousness that comes when you embrace food as nourishment. So on today's show, I'm so excited to have one of my most influential and favorite chef instructors, Celine Beitchman, who in her own right is not just an amazing natural food chef, but also really a nutrition and integrative health guru, a healthy food expert and educator. So, for the last 15 years, Celine has made such an impact. She's been sharing her culinary expertise, her nutritional wisdom with students, doctors, health coaches, and other allied professionals. She's developed programs and led hands-on cooking instruction for the medical professionals, specializing in conditions like celiac disease and cancer. Most recently, Celine is the Director of Nutrition at ICE, the Institute for Culinary Education in New York City, in their Health Supportive Culinary Arts Department. Her work is truly amazing. She's been featured in Bon Appetit, Brit & Co., The Huffington Post, Forks Over Nines, Mind Body Green, and The Today Show, just to name a few. Celine's background is so fascinating. She grew up learning about natural foods from traveling with her, as she says, hippie parents and her time living in Brooklyn, as well as the south of France. It was at an early age that she developed this appreciation for the connection between what you eat and how you feel. So she went on to apprentice in Paris and pursue 15 years of high-end catering in New York City. She finished her undergraduate degree in film, but she went on to work and travel at restaurants around the world doing catering, food styling, as well as high-end private chefing. What I love about Celine, as she'll share with us today, is her truly genuine, holistic perspective on food. Seeing food as connected to all systems in life, our body, our agriculture, the planet, our culture. Of course, the profound healing powers as a result of food to create true well-being. Her vast knowledge and ability to share it in an inspiring way, whether it's sharing the health benefits of cooking with dandelion greens and miso, or being in on the latest culinary trends, from tips to how to be a healthy vegetarian, medicinal cooking for cancer. She really embodies what I've come to appreciate as what's missing in most mainstream conversations about food and health. Okay. Hey, Celine, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing great today. It's so good to be in your presence in some sense.
Yay, I'm so glad. It's nice. We're not wearing masks and we're not wearing our chef uniform. So It's kind of a different vibe, but I love it.
Peer to peer.
peer to peer. So I am so excited to have you here and just jump into conversation a little bit, about your passion, about my passion when it comes to food and health. We're here to kind of elevate the conversation, blow through some myths and just give people maybe some additional guidance and inspiration around how to look at food and their bodies a little differently these days. Because there's so much noise out there, isn't there? Just a lot of confusion, a lot of overwhelm. And one of the things that I want to start with is when we went to Natural Gourmet together, this philosophy of food as medicine, right? Food as medicine was really kind of this overarching theme that we dove into. What does that mean to you nowadays?
Well, I think of it more in terms of food as a therapeutic tool. Food can provide a therapeutic outlet on so many levels, and it can be a therapeutic sort of meditation, and it can also provide an actual sort of intervention level, medicine style kind of therapy. So it's kind of a broad definition for me in that sense. I think Natural Gourmet's foundation in macrobiotics was where sort of the food and medicine thing was really, really kind of met up for Anne-Marie Colbin, who founded the school. And a lot of sort of using food as a way to heal yourself so that you were avoiding maybe conventional medicine or mainstream medicine was kind of what that messaging was more about. Yeah. I see it kind of in a bigger sense, I'd say. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And you mean your path has really married all the philosophy around food as medicine, but really seeing the interconnection and the different applications, right, as we evolve, in modern day life.
Yeah, I think one of the things that keeps sort of coming up for me and is the metaphor of the recipe, and that the recipe of our lives, or the recipe that we choose to follow from time to time, can provide a guidepost as we organize information around what we're learning and taking in kind of all that noise and translating to something for a period of time, and seeing if that recipe works, right? And for that, we need the trial and error of the making of the recipe, right? We need to be able to, enjoy its outcome in all the ways that it shows up, right?
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, the recipe.
I love that. Yeah, because that's a little bit more freeing, than that, one size fits all, or eat this way, or get this right, this diet, that diet. I think that's kind of all the noise, is that we're losing our sovereignty in terms of when it comes to deciding what really is healing for us.
We have also this sort of, measure of perfection that something about, I think, the social media aspects of food have driven home really hard, and that all of our attempts in the kitchen and in our own lives in any aspect should be so photographable, as to be posted and viral and liked, and if not, they're somehow lacking. And then I think that's a mentality that we need to just consider.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, is it post-worthy, right? That's what the standard has become almost. And look how healthy I'm eating. It's become a little, kind of superficial that way, right?
Yeah.
Or competitive even, frankly.
Yeah, jockeying for who's the healthiest,
Who's making the best veggie, whatever, right? Yeah, that's kind of crazy. Food as a sport, I guess, right?
Yeah. We have to consider these fundamental questions that I think Anne-Marie Colbin taught me in the early stages of my working with her, really at a very young age even, and then others that I saw kind of up to me delving into science, sort of more deeply, was what is health? What is the goal? Where are we going? And how do we know when we get there? And what's the signpost, right? And this idea that we're going to arrive in a place like health, if you will, like body weight, which is such a huge trauma, I want to say, for people, and that we're never ever gonna have to deal with it again, right? Once we get there, we're done, and now we can move on to something else, right? But it's not like that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's so interesting because even in my own journey, and I'd love to know with you, but I remember saying literally, it was probably right around shortly after Natural Gourmet. And as I was exploring, teaching and food with my clients and with students, I remember saying specifically, how I eat today is great for me now, but I'm totally open to how that's going to look like 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now. It could look totally different. And that's perfectly correct, right?
Right.
Yeah. How about you? How has that changed for you?
Well, I think as a teacher over the years, I think I get a lot of questions from students who are looking for sort of what is the way, what's the path, and so the question that always comes up that I've answered in different ways over the years, well, how do you eat? Wanting to know like what's in my pantry, what's in my closet, what am I carrying in my grocery bags, and looking over when I'm eating, for me, I think because I am, so to speak, naturally thin, and I've always had a super high metabolism, and it's not to say that I don't gain weight or, that I'm happy or not happy with my physical form, but that always lends itself to people wanting to know, well, how do I do it?
Interesting.
And it's sort of put me in this position to try to put off those questions in a sense, or really try to explain to people on some level or other that, just because it whatever is working for me is working for me now, it doesn't mean that it will work for you. There's so much involved.
No, you're absolutely right. That's interesting. Thank you. The idea of going back to external experience, external appearances, the connection, the true connection that exists between body weight, body shape, and well-being. It's kind of that really, it's almost like a third rail, right? And, but at the end of the day, I think maybe that's why I've hoped to elevate, people's conversations around food, because food is really something so much more than making you fat or thin, or even quite honestly, a bunch of calories and nutrients and super nutrients. It's so much more, right? Because as you, in your journey, when you were young, I remember you learned at an early age, this amazing connection, which people to this day are still trying to figure out. When I eat this, I feel that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's that connection right there, I think, is kind of what has gotten really fuzzy.
Yeah. Well, and I think also the as I've learned over time that there are a lot of different inputs that can create the same kind of output. And, it's important that we, sort of explore all of the, possibilities that might create a certain given outcome. We talk about sort of diet culture and weight and health and all of that. There are a lot of things that can cause, all of that to go off the rails, right? And a lot of things that are, I would say, like, extra, up outside of food, outside of nutrition, outside of what we take into our mouths and process, stress and, sleep and all those things that are, vital for our health. Right. And as we learn that, the connections that, maybe food provides in order to make things like hormones that help us sleep better, and how that then feeds into us being hungrier for more food to make better choices. It's hard to separate all of the points and features because I think they're so intermeshed. So I think we need patience as we work it all out.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Patience and less rigidity, because I think it's that interconnection that I just know that in my, years, I prickle more and more when I hear, like, and you have to eat this, and, keto's the way and paleo's the way. And I get everybody's playing, they're bringing their own passion for what's working for them to the table. But I also kind of prickle at that because it goes inherently against everything you just said, which is that, food really is so much more in the context of our life and our family culture, our lifestyle, right? And it's hard to kind of distill all that down into calories and fat grams and eat this, don't eat that.
Well, I think that I'm also lucky. I don't know if this is something that happened to you after culinary school when you started to maybe play around with it at a different level. But as a professional chef who was steeped in that for most of her life and spent most of my time cooking in a professional way and cooking all different kinds of foods and different kinds of diets, it wasn't until I got to teach in a culinary school environment, especially in the last maybe 10 or so years, that the kinds of different meals I was making were suddenly labeled, as a particular dietary pattern, right? And suddenly, like, if I'm making a meal that doesn't have any of starchy carbohydrates in it. And just because I'm making that, because that's the food that's available at the market and what my client had wanted, it's suddenly now, in today's day, we would call that what? Keto, right? It doesn't mean that, practically speaking, it doesn't mean that that's going to elicit a ketogenic outcome, but we're going to label that meal keto now. And so then if I'm eating it, suddenly I'm a keto eater. Right. And then I have to adopt all of the sort of paraphernalia of that, the accessories of that. I have to look the part and I have to be convincing, right? And then I have to tell people why I'm doing it. But I think I benefited from the fact that, and other chefs that I relate to in this that have certainly can't help but be aware of all of the food culture around us and all of the move towards healthier eating, all that. And a lot of the chefs that I've known over the years relate to food at that level where we can see like different meal patterns as just creations, as interesting experiments, as a kind of trial and error of a recipe we're producing, and not as this is a way to live forever.
Oh, yes. I love that. Again, the creativity, the exploration, right? That the curious kind of mindset that goes into it, right? And that's huge. And I think that's that creative aspect and that enjoyment of just, let's see how this turns out and what does this do? That's what I got from Natural Gourmet, because it really was, and I never considered myself a creative person, right? I was told I didn't color in the lines enough when I was 5 years old, scarred me for life. Okay. All right. But in the kitchen, right? At least not with, pastry and baking, there was a lot of opportunity for exploring. How does that taste? Ooh, can you taste this? And really, it was such a sensory experience, of being in that environment. And again, I think I bring that, that's why my goal is not to have you spend 5-6 hours in the kitchen. My goal is to really just enjoy, see how simple, see how lively, empowering it can be to get your hands on the food. Right.
Yeah. And I think it's also a kind of, it becomes a teaching tool in the sense that it's a window into your ability to engage in the world in a sensory fashion, right? So kind of, recalibrating your senses to, like your own ability to appreciate things, right?
Yes, exactly.
And I didn't really, in fact, I feel also strongly about a kind of before and after in my life when it came to really noticing food. At the level that you're describing, kind of the taste and textures and the sensory aspects of it that are creative. Because for me, for many years, prior to this moment, I'll mention it a bit, it was very technical for me, practical and about recreating, based on skills I'd learned to produce something for a particular chef or job, whatever, very, very technical craft oriented, right?
Yes.
But when I undertook my wine studies, that's when I really learned how to taste. And I bring some of that into my teaching nowadays that we don't really get in a traditional culinary school, which is sort of the blind taste test, the sort of, turn the lights, off and close your eyes and smell and try to shut down some of the noise that happens when we're looking in different directions, I don't really do that enough in the food worlds.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. So you went on to become versed in food and wine pairing, right? Essentially.
Well, I think you just sort of naturally bring those aspects together. What you realize when you're tasting and exploring what wine contains, and what's to me so mind-boggling about it is we're talking about something that's made out of one fruit, right? The grape, of course, all the different, myriad kinds of grapes out there, but really the grape that can produce so many hundreds of thousands of chemicals that smell like familiar things to us, right? And we think about food in a much more limited way as a single note item. Once you start to realize that, chemistry in wine gives rise to flavor compounds that are found in other things because those chemicals exist there, then you start pairing, right, to those chemicals in a way, right? Yeah. Or to the taste that you're able to recognize.
Yeah. No, it's just a deeper appreciation for the role that, food and pleasure are supposed to go together, right? That's what makes us human in a sense. We get to elevate how we choose to eat our food. It's beautiful.
I agree. I think it's a continuum. I think, one of the really important aspects of food for me that bears on, how I would pair food and wine, or how I might sort of bring someone into the space that they hold in the continuum of the world is how, for example, when it comes to something like wines and foods, I look back to the culture that grew that original grape, that made that original wine, and I look to the foods that were made in that region, and that's where you see the natural, which then connects you to those people and to that place and to that time, and then I think you feel, maybe at least I do, a little less alone.
Yeah. Again, the deeper origins and the history, and the same thing I think is thankfully really got so much momentum now is the whole farm to table movement. Understanding where your food comes from, knowing your farmer, caring about the way they treat the land. I think that, again, is the lens that is, again, healthier perspectives on food, right? Other than what food can do to make us healthy, but food is health, right? Depending on how we work with it in our lives and how we view it in our lives.
Yeah, that sounds very profound. I like the way you put that.
But speaking of food and health, so you're bringing, as I know you've said, putting wellness on the plate for all the people. I'm just going to say the mainstream medical model, which has kind of had a blind spot when it comes to the role of food and supporting our body's healing abilities. So knowing you've been on the front line there, is there progress happening? I'm dying to ask you this question. Is there progress happening when it comes to the mainstream medical model in terms of embracing food and healing?
I think it depends on what aspect of the mainstream medical world we're discussing, because I think that there's a sort of spectrum in that may or may not have the interest in it because of whatever area they're specializing in. So we're talking about kind of acute care, mainstream, or we're talking about preventative medicine. So I just want to kind of I think it's important for me because not because your question necessarily is going in that direction, but because the question to me sort of pings a bit for the us versus them, or the what mainstream versus alternative, and so I think it's more like a kind of a groundswell, more so than it's a mainstream medical or mainstream anything, but kind of a groundswell of wanting some transparency in the food that we're consuming. I mean, there's a whole model like maybe that's being promoted out there in some mainstream medical environments because they maybe have the time to spend educating their clients in this direction, or their patients in this direction, towards health promoting diets. But there's not really a lot of time in the mainstream medical environment to full disclosure, my partner is a physician, and maybe that softened me a bit in terms of what's available and possible within that model. I think that customer demand drives a lot of what's available out there, and when we think about something like this pandemic that we're in right now, we look at the statistics for food sales, and we see that, just think like in the Times today, some article maybe by Jane Brody or someone else, on the scene, talking about how the sales of processed foods have skyrocketed since people have quarantined.
Sure.
And then I think about all my chef friends and former and current students who all I don't even know if this is a real word in the lexicon, procrastinating, right? Baking.
No.
Right? So if you're out there and you're buying all your food because you don't cook a lot, now you're buying more processed. And if you're cooking at home, you're using like flour and yeast, and maybe you're using your alternative sweeteners, but you're still basically
sure.
So, there's so many Shake Shacks, and what's happening out there, what's sold out there as a measure of what, the mainstream medical model can kind of work with, in a sense. How do they?
Yeah. No, I see what you're saying. And I guess my question is, when you develop the curriculum and the programming, let's say for doctors, dietitians, other health professionals to come in and actually learn, through the lens of what, if people make these changes on their plate, what's possible, right? Again, how people get, that's definitely a whole other conversation to your point, which is how we get people to actually agree to do that is a whole other hurdle. But I'm curious about just the experience, the experiences you've had, let's say, cooking alongside did you have any, I guess, gastrointestinal, specialists, or did you have any, just primary care physicians?
I think, my experience, I would say, would be limited to the degree that most people who are in in a professional medical environment don't necessarily have a lot of time to be breaking out and taking, a 2-week course with me. So those that have been able to are bringing it in because they are interested in adding some, what I would describe maybe even, unfortunately in a pejorative sense, it maybe comes out that way, like a complementary aspect to their existing, business. Yeah. Right? Because they're suddenly realizing how important it is. But what I find more so in my experience with working with people who are in the so-called mainstream medical environment is that they don't know how to cook. They are just as impressed and excited by learning, how to saute spinach, and that, a little lemon does, wakes up flavor. And they're just like regular people, and they don't have any real special knowledge in this area. And, yeah, I think they're just as interested as anyone else, but it's just a question of time constraints and practicalities that gets in the way of it, which I would suggest is probably the issue for most of us, even the best of us making the best attempts at navigating all of this stuff we do every day. And also.
Right. Time. Yeah. Interest in time that you mentioned. So yeah, agreed. So the question is, what gets in the way, how can we change our level of interest, right? And how could maybe we can decide that our time, we can make some modifications around that, like what would be possible, right? It always comes down to, I guess, our curiosity, our willingness to see things differently and then maybe have different choices around food. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What would you say, we talked about keto and paleo and all that kind of, you said, I love that, all the paraphernalia that goes with these diets, right? What would you change about the mainstream dogma of that? Are you paleo? Are you keto? Or are you macrobiotic? Are you vegan? If you could change it, like what would you decide?
Well, this is like, in a magic world where I get to rub the genie lamp.
Exactly.
And it just happens like that without all the complications surrounding it. I think one of our, it's a double-edged sword to this world that we live in where, expert opinions abound. And at the same time, no one believes any of the experts who have backgrounds in this information. So, what's troubling is people sort of following the prettiest, maybe whatever the pretty means. I'm not necessarily saying it,
yes,
but what is the prettiest message? That seems to that appeals to your confirmation bias about how the world works and how your body works, right? But when I talk to people about things like what ketosis is, that I would change is really maybe tempering how you absorb information, trying to sort of see where it lands without just following it. And also being willing to try it for a period of time. I think you had mentioned somehow, and and this is such a common theme in kind of diet culture is like, if it's not working, it must be you, right? You're the one that's not working, because here's this perfect thing. We've figured it out in an academic environment. We figured it out in the research. It's small white, mice it works with, or on cell cultures it's working. Well, you are the wrong person, right? So we just need a little bit more, just this thing that I just, love from Anne Marie's work, which is like this heuristic, right? The trial and error, the not yet, the try it on for a couple weeks.
Beautiful.
Doesn't feel good, doesn't mean you have to throw the whole thing out. a lot of the people that I went to graduate school with were people who are already working out there in the field who are doing nutrition counseling and therapy in that level. That's one of their kind of biggest pet peeves. And I think a lot of what I'll do as a teacher in culinary school or with clients is, I don't know, like, what do you call it? Debunking myths. I'm sort of de-brainwashing them. What happens when you come back from like war? You have to be like sort of debriefed and it's almost like I have to like, so what is your thinking coming from, and how do you approach information, and kind of help someone understand how they're absorbing things. Makes sense.
That's powerful. Yeah, no, I totally agree, because it's almost when I'm given a workshop, I almost have to say that, which is assume you know nothing.
Yeah.
Everything you've learned about nutrition is at best questionable.
Mm-hmm.
You get locked in almost with this fervor, because that's kind of the conversation level. It's like, oh, this is the way it is, and this is good and this is bad. You're absolutely right. I think it blocks us off from really evolving where we need to be with that perspective.
I don't know if you experience this in your work with people. At what point do they come to see you? I would imagine that would bear on it. But people who are so concerned with like knowing what the exact sort of answer is to everything, and that being like a really stuck place for them, like kind of unwilling to move on from it. And being, you mentioned that you work with women, kind of within our age range, and that's someone who has been eating for 45, 50 years. A very early sort of, not really riddle, but kind of like math question I ask students when they first meet me, and is, how many meals have you eaten? I just throw this question out, 365, or something like 1,003, which is 3 meals a day times, 365 times your age.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And when they come up with that number, we just throw these random numbers from the room. They just call out random numbers, and they don't even know what it's about yet, because I don't say that's how many meals you've eaten. I just say, this is the number, multiply by your age, just throw these numbers up. And when I ask students like what all those numbers are, I imagine like 20 numbers ranging from 10,000 to 60,000. They're like, what is it? I don't know. And that's the amount of meals they've eaten. And when they meet me, they want to know why everything is wrong with them, and why they're And if I were to have like a session with them as a nutritionist, I might be able to find some, issues going on. But by and large, they are relatively healthy, right? Biologically speaking.
Yes.
Like alive and alert and not falling off their chairs. And
yes.
Malnourished maybe, but like within a very, small range of the over and under. There's such a concern about the moment now and in the future, but you probably made a gazillion so-called mistakes leading to this point, and you've survived it, and remarkably, beautifully, right? I mean, so
I love that. I think that sounds like very familiar. Did you do that in my class?
I'm sure that we did, because it was something
it's echoing something. I love it, because it got me thinking. There is a stuckness that can happen around that, about trying to get it right, should have done it differently, look at so-and-so, but I read an article and my hairdresser told me, and yada, 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 right? And what that cuts us off from is, again, also what we were talking about, and certainly what happened in my training at NGI, was trusting yourself. Really trusting your experience. Your experience is real, like, you eat this, you feel that, you got excited about it, you enjoyed it, it made you feel amazing, you wanted to learn and do it more. And as you said, Anne-Marie's heuristic approach, and that is the most natural relationship with food. And I use the word natural for what it really means, that I think we need to reconnect to. We need to rediscover that.
Yeah. I think there's also like a lot of things going on for people. It's hard for me to generalize too much. I think, you and I, may have a very similar approach, or we spent time in a class together, certainly. So, there's a shared experience that we may carry just subconsciously, through our lives. As I meet people through teaching or as clients, there's just so many ways in which people are complex and bring all this information in. And I find that with each encounter, I need to kind of put my universal translator in my ear, like almost like, what language are we speaking now? What, are you considering when I say alkaline? Like, do you think alkaline diet? What do you think? Do you think baking soda?
Trying to see through the lens, what lens are they viewing their relationship and with food and health and all of it. Yeah. It is really interesting. We have to kind of peel back a lot of layers sometimes, right? Mm-hmm. But speaking of that, at the end of the day, I believe you don't need to be, by the way, everybody, you don't need to be a professional chef to be able to, eat, cook, and health, your way to health. But cooking does play a fundamental role, in my opinion, and we were talking earlier, if it's just roasting a tray of vegetables or making a simple salad, right? That's healing compared to so many other things we try to, in the name of convenience, right? How do you get people these days, you think, inspired around food? What's the conversation that you like to have to kind of ignite people into thinking they do have the time? You don't need to be an expert. It is worth it.
Well, I think that it's helpful for me to share that I have frozen and canned food in my house, that there are times when I'm so tired I need to order a pizza. I think it's important for me to express to them that it's not like an abstract idea, but that it's a reality that we need to figure out how it's going to work. And that will include, shortcuts and some home cooking and some not home cooking and some takes a village kind of cooking. And so, as with like kind of how I approach maybe a nutritional intervention that I may know in my heart will take many years to, show itself in its best stages, or, I may just start by saying, you're going to add in like another 2 servings of fruit for the next 3 months. Right. And I think that it's about building self-efficacy, right? And it's too many people that I know and love dearly that are this all or nothing kind of mentality. If you're shopping through Fresh Direct or whatever, so buy some broccoli raw that's already cooked and made, and add that to a piece of fish that you are cooking, and identify what is wholesome, but don't necessarily have to make all of it.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, another obstacle is that all or nothing, right? Have to be perfect, as you said, has to be photo worthy.
Well, and
right?
I have, you have children. I have, niece and nephew and friends with children. And we have to, I think, appreciate that whatever message we are, projecting or sending out there or believe in and adopt ourselves for your and my age group is one that we have to expect that those younger folks are going to have to somehow bring into their lives, because we can, let them run along and then we'll, good luck. And when you get to 50, come on over and I'm going to show you, I'm going to set you straight. It's like, well, what's going to work for them? And,
right.
And in a way they're nobody ever grows up kind of in a way when it comes to some things in life. Right. And so I think we have to be, we have to be our teenager selves in a way when it comes to cooking.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's about being practical. It's having balance. I think that's one surest way to, suck the fun out of cooking is to, be your own taskmaster.
Yeah,
right? We were even talking during the pandemic, take out, when you can, it works well, to kind of just, ease the pressure, which most of the time is self-imposed anyway. So, but yeah, no, I'm a huge fan of important shortcuts. Have a well-stocked pantry, some really good staples that you can just whip up, pull up, something left over becomes a side and, all that good stuff. So yeah, I love that. Moderation. And I love your idea about self-efficacy, because that goes to the heart of this conversation when it comes to nutritional changes. We have to believe that we can make positive changes. We have to believe in ourselves that we have what it takes to do that.
Yeah.
Right? That's huge.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a kind of also For me, like it sort of runs the gamut from maybe like a clinical sort of personalized nutrition concept to a sort of a very generalized public health one. And within all of that is, how you're supported by things outside of your own person. And so, how we engage with the food world outside of our kitchen, where we get our food from, and what we're purchasing and how that provides for more food in the future and for healthier communities just by anchoring stores and all that kind of stuff. I think that also plays a role in our mental health and our relationship to food and our interest in wanting to do it. I'll sometimes feel a little bit bored with cooking, but find myself in a farmer's market or in a really good produce aisle, and then suddenly be inspired. And it's thanks to those places that I have, and know sometimes I have to take myself to those places to get some inspiration.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, absolutely. I always have this amazing feeling. The farmers markets are just starting to open up here. And so I went for the first time 2 weekends ago, and oh my gosh, it was like everyone's wearing masks, but we're all smiling.
You can see it. You can see it up here.
Yep, exactly. But it was exactly that. There was just this feeling of aliveness and freshness and celebration, and all the colors and everything. And again, I think that's, instead of the have to, should to, this can kill you or this will save you dogma, it really just harkens back to what lights you up, what can, and food can do that. Again, we have to teach people that food can do that. It really is possible.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
It's there's also, there's slippery slopes. And I think we have to also admit that, things like intuitive eating or how people approach in a personal way isn't necessarily healthy for their bodies biologically, right? And we need to kind of recalibrate sometimes, and that requires a retraining. I don't know what your upbringing was specifically, but I know that my kind of intuition around what a plate looks like at the table was wrought from having, that drilled into me over the first, say 7 or 8 years of my life before I was, really more sentient about food and all. But, what health is comes from, or what food is and how we organize it, and it making us happy or not happy. Not necessarily, connected to nutrients, as right? Connected to how that food's delivered to us and under what circumstances we're eating it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's a whole different level of consciousness that you can take to what it means to have food and to, what role it's going to play, especially these days, as we said, when you start looking at, the economics of food or the, global sustainability, environmental issues around food. But I think that's what's so interesting about it, is that when we distill food into, again, dogma, we lose that richness, and we lose that richness because it's important, for us to have a deeper relationship with food. So and I love this conversation because I'm a science geek, and I think in your class, even though it was a culinary class, I was hungry for all the knowledge that you were sharing about that, and so I can go off on leaky gut easily as I can go on about, self-compassion. They're both like awesome topics.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And really have a lot of things in common with one another. In fact, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. But, marrying the two, right? Which is, yes, trust yourself, be open, watch those limiting beliefs, but also recognize that right now we are in an amazing age of science, nutritional science. I mean, it's exploding, right? Around epigenetics and the microbiome. So I think it doesn't have to be an all or nothing. I think that's the whole beauty of us having, these conversations, is that we now have both. We can marry both science and spirit around this.
Yeah. I mean, no offense to any, group that is sort of anti-science or living in a, kind of, a less modern environment by choice or by whatever. But I agree fundamentally that to not appreciate all of the information that we have out there is a disservice to ourselves. And it's just like turn your back on something because it's science. I've been in environments where it's been so abhorred to bring up science-based models that they'll put science in quotes and, like, well, what do you mean by, quotes, unquote, science? I think it's a disservice to people to ignore all of the definitions out there on food or labels on food and not help people understand what those things mean, at the same time that I want people to step away from, being tied down to
yes.
Calories and things like that. And at the same time, for me, sodium is really important to consider. And I think so much of what we eat is full of it. And if you are getting a lot of processed stuff, you need to read that label, understand what that means. You need to understand what it means relatively to how much you're getting and eating. And I think it's not something that you can necessarily taste in the food. And so I question the limit of sort of the intuitive model on those grounds, right? So I think it's important to, again, it's education, as you brought up, like educate the person to what's happening and what all these things mean out there. Yeah. I mean, I have so many bits about this from just individual experience with people where most of the people that I have worked with are under eating for their body's needs. And they're so caught up in the energy model, so caught up in, and so disconnected, as you described, to hunger and satiety levels, and so confused in a way about what they need to do for themselves, that they're eating below what their body needs to survive, right? Mm-hmm. Most people don't understand that you need 70% of your calories to maintain basic biological function, and that, eating below that or at that is not going to result in, some weight loss.
Interesting.
Right?
Yes.
So when I start to explain those models to people, explain some of the practical aspects of that, just as an addition to maybe their more emotional approach to
I love that.
I think it's really helpful. It just provides more context.
Context. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, if we understand why and how, it gives me more motivation and focus to actually give it a try, or to, say, yeah, that sounds like that would be good for me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. GMOs and organics. Just want to get your little, again, there's an explosion of research and science, and it's connected to so many other economic systems, right?
Yeah.
What do you teach these days, in your practice or actually with students?
I think when it comes to, let's tackle organics first. I think when it comes to organics, I think it's important to consider what organics mean and what labeling laws are, and what your food budget is, and what you can or cannot access. And I think that the danger of focusing on organics or GMOs or irradiation or any kind of potentially nefarious sounding aspect of the food system is potentially a trigger for orthorexia, right? And I've experienced it myself. I've witnessed it. I've been in a store where I've not known how to decide what to get, faced with the choice of some vibrant, beautiful, bouquet of greens that's not organic versus the wilted, limpy, whatever. And I think that I think organics as a movement or as a concept is a very big concept, that speaks to land use and labor use and all of that, right? And it's a recirculating concept. It's about a sustainable model for the earth. But, there's even more well-developed ones like biodynamics, for example, that's, not that promoted, way more expensive. But, I just try to present facts really as much as I can about these two and let people decide what is valuable to them, but also remind them again of how many meals they've eaten so far, and question who am I talking to? Is it someone who is pregnant and there's a baby in there that we're concerned with, and, where relative size and exposure to things may be more problematic, or, so that's maybe an issue.
Yes, that's so important.
But I think when it comes to kind of GMOs, I've done a lot of research on it over time. I'm not a biochemist. I'm not somebody who works like at a high level at all in this area, and who either in policy or in the food or chemical level of it. But it seems to me that one of the big concerns about GMOs, apart from controlling like seeds, so that farmers can't replant and that kind of stuff, that sounds just, to me like inhumane and just a crazy aspect of the business or the industry, is the cross breeding of species that can result in allergies for individuals. So if somebody is eating something that doesn't obviously have wheat in it, and yet it's been crossbred with something because of some environmental reason for growth or stability or whatever, to have some particular wheat DNA in it, does that then lead to you being allergic now to that particular food that's not wheat based but now has a wheat DNA in it?
Mm-hmm.
And now then how does that kind of how does that manifest in the culture? How do you figure out what's edible or not for you, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So that's really, I think, an issue from a nutritional standpoint, but I think the subject is just really too big for me in a way to opine.
Yeah. Well, I think it's another opportunity for, as you said, to kind of, when we're out there educating, students and clients, it's arm them with the information and the facts, and then making decisions that support their lifestyle, their budget, their just whatever's within their possible, I guess. Right. And again, isn't that kind of what I always say, is we're always doing the best that we can,
Yeah.
and that's another thing I think when it comes to nutrition, that we need to give ourselves a little bit of a break here, turn off the noise and just trust a little bit more and be open. It's really not as complicated as everybody has been made you to believe. Right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Right.
We can say that about everything though in life, right?
Right.
I'm pretty good at complicating things.
Although that question, what's for dinner? Ooh, it's like nails on a chalkboard these days. It's all relative.
Cooking class is what's for dinner.
Right. Exactly. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a fun question. If you had to be stranded on a desert island, what is the one food that you would absolutely want to make sure you had an endless supply of?
God, that's such a hard one for me, Christine, because when I think about that, I think I'd get bored with it. I think probably good, because I think I probably have at some point in my life been in environments where I did get that, did get like a lot of a certain thing because maybe I was catering, or there was a lot of it somewhere, and I thought, you know what, like maybe I'll buy 3 cases of this and I'll figure out peaches, and I'm like, by the end of a month, I'm like, no more peaches. And, I think it would be I've always said for me, I always said cherries. Cherries always come up for me as like a favorite food, and I love them. So I just
okay. And then maybe you could make some brandy out of that too on the island, right?
Savory. I mean, of course, I'd be like catching fish and
yes,
eating coconuts and palm things, of course.
I could totally see a lot of opportunity there. I love it. That's great. That's great. Okay.
Well, I'd like to throw it at you.
Back at me? Yeah. It's funny. Favorite food, you mentioned coconut, but I guess that already grows on an island. I'm a little obsessed with coconut, I'll be honest with you, I think. But, these days I would probably tell you some fresh greens, and I don't say that because it's the right thing to say, but literally because, I've been, places where we're on vacation or on the road, and you'll go for at least a week, let's say a few days without getting really fresh greens. I mean, you might be eating healthy other things, sweet broccoli and, whatever, but fresh greens, I really do mean that. I feel different when I don't get them. So, and they're versatile, right?
Not fair though, Christine, because you put greens, and that's a huge category.
I know, that's true. That's kind of like a category.
Fruit.
Okay. Okay. So, Dino kale.
Hook. Oh, dino kale. Okay.
Yeah, dino kale. Because again, very flexible. Can eat it raw, and you can steam it and crisp it and all that. So.
But like just to back to my answer in a sense, I think that just me knowing that I would get bored with the same thing, even the healthiest thing is
not so healthy.
I think that's really important, right? I mean, to expect that anyone's going to follow anything for any duration. I mean, we're talking about a lifetime here, right? The kind of the new language, right? Replacing like diet with like sort of living and healthy patterns over your lifetime. Well, it's like, what does that mean? That sounds like interminable, on some level.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So what are you curious about right now?
Well, I think that one thing that keeps kind of servicing is a push, even though I'm a little bit reluctant to see it in as many places as are pointed out, that there is a sort of push to it, like a simpler kind of eating style, to food that we can recognize more, to less complicated foods, even like in the Instagram world where people are like making beautiful pictured food, whatever. There's some more simple items and becoming the order of the day. And I think that it's maybe my wish and maybe a part of like kind of this new brave new world we're entering when it comes to dining is maybe a move to not so much people cooking more, but eating sort of more wholesome food and less adulterated and maybe people taking more culinary classes in some level or other, in home or online or whatever, and realizing how economically or therapeutically or biologically or emotionally whatever valuable that is compared to eating out. Which isn't to say I'm against eating out, but that's never really been a big part of my life and my experience is eating in restaurants. I've worked in them and I find them to be really enjoyable in the venues, but restaurants are like theater to me. I think that's the hospitality industry, right?
Yes.
So to me, there's an artifice and a kind of lovely thing I enjoy in any level of restaurant, but I think wishful thinking, I don't know, where I the way that the Natural Gourmet Center at the Institute of Culinary Education has evolved, even in the year or so that they brought the curriculum in, has just grown in terms of people wanting to be in the program and interest in it, and so I think that's a big tell.
I love that.
I hope. I don't know.
I share the same vision, and I think that vision is actually why I do what I do, right? Because it's based on that principle, which is you can't get it wrong. You just have to be curious, and there's a lot out there, so and there's a lot to gain. So I love it. I'll come live in your world. So we'll create it together.
Right. I'll be your private chef. You could be my private chef.
There you go. You can be my sommelier as well, which would be lovely.
Got it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything that I didn't get a chance to ask you that you would love to share? Or
one of the things that I think food can teach us is how to be resilient, and that we might not like one taste, but we might like another, and we may find that this store is out of it, but it has something else, or that we made it a different way, and like there's so many levels in which I think food can provide a measure of how we function in the world in a manner that teaches us or reminds us of our ability to be resilient in the face of all kinds of other bigger issues, right? So
yes,
it's just a huge teaching tool, and I think it has the potential to be that over your lifetime, even if you're not always tapping into it.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. Okay, so thank you. This has been awesome. And again, I just want to thank you. And Celine, if people want to kind of learn more about you, where would you send them, like online?
If they want to learn more about me, I would probably send them to ice.edu.
Okay.
And they could find information about me and upcoming classes. The school's kind of like in an interim stage right now, but we're going to keep in September again. And so they can certainly reach out to me there or find me there, find more information about me. I have a ton of writing I've done over the years. If you just keyword search my name in Google, you'll find a lot of writing I've done. Certainly people can find me on Facebook, right? I'm not huge in social media, so that's a good one.
All right, Celine. Well, thank you so much.
I had a great conversation with you, Christine.
Me too. That was lovely.
Enlightening.
Yes.
Thank you.
Same. Thank you.
Great.
Be well. Bye-bye.
Bye.